you a home grower looking for a little bit of help? Are you ready to learn as much as you can about your favorite hobby? The Homegrown Helpers brings you informative interviews from experienced growers that have taken the next steps in their journey and decided to help you grow top quality cannabis all in your home. Now welcome in our host, Rob Smith, along with this week's Homegrown Helper. Welcome, all you cats and kittens. Sorry, I couldn't refuse. If you haven't watched The Tiger King yet, I hope it makes you feel a little bit better about your little messed up part of the world. Sure did mine. Today on this episode of the Homegrown Helpers, I have a great interview with Chris, who is in Hawaii when we chat, originally from Maine. And if anybody's ever made that trek, which I have, it's very hard to adjust to the 5 or 6 hour time difference when making that trek. I was there for 12 days and I didn't make the adjustment at any point in time. So, when I'm talking with Chris, it's really early in the morning there. I think it was 5 a.m. or 6 a.m. There. And, Chris didn't think he brought his best performance, but I've listened to this interview a couple times and I think there's tons of valuable information here. So Chris comes back for a part 2, which you'll hear next week. But, in this episode, what we get into is really valuable information. We cover his history and his background. And again, I want to thank Chris for his service protecting us. I do get into talking about New England Veterans Alliance, and I want to just put this out there before it gets away from me. We did not pull off the used equipment drive, and that's really because of the quarantine and stay-at-home orders throughout world, but especially here in New England. So stay tuned for that. We definitely want to do that again. We wanted to structure this interview around budget grows and keeping things on the cheap. So this is 2 weeks in a row that you're going to get some advice on doing things more on the inexpensive side. And Chris walks you through really well thought out game plan on how he provides for his own medicine. And I think working backwards from the goal is really key. And, we get into things to avoid, how to increase yield, which, speaks to something that I talk a lot about. And that's consistent journaling. That's Chris's tip here. Then we wrap this up with some more grow advice and get you ready for part 2, where Chris joins me in a couple more weeks in real time, but you'll get to hear it next week. So what's going on with Grow Pass right now, huh? Right now, membership is closed, but you can still get a 7-day trial for $3. And we also have some awesome giveaways happening. What's giving away? Oh, we're right in the middle of a trim bag giveaway valued at over $300. All you have to do is go to our link tree. That's linktree.growcast or /growcast, the link in our Instagram bio, or growcastpodcast.com/giveaway. Enter your information for a chance to win a trim bag. That's $330. They ship it to you for free, so you save money there. And get yours today. Today's episode is brought to you by a company near and dear to my heart, and that is Rooted Life. Rooted Life is run by my wife and her friend Sarah, and they make premium CBD products. They have some amazingly big deals coming down the pike. So if you want to get on the hottest, latest CBD booming company before it booms, now's the time. Rooted Life with a Y, LYFE.com. Use code GROWCAST. Grab yourself 10% off. Try some CBD products. We all have a little added anxiety through all of this process that we're going through. And CBD certainly helps. It helps me. I notice it. I really more notice it when I'm not taking it. But I notice it. The wife takes it. We have so many friends that take it regularly. We encourage you. Start with some tincture. We have some roll-ons, face masks, all sorts of stuff that's premium, triple lab tested, organic products, most importantly. So rootedlife.com. And let's wrap this up and kick it over to the interview with Chris. All right, guys, I am here with another fantastic episode. Just in our pre-interview chat, I know Chris is going to really bring some practical grow advice and knowledge for you guys from his experiences and failures. So, welcome to the show, Chris. How you doing today?
Thank you. I'm doing great. Thank you very much.
So Chris, you have a very specific passion and it, revolves around your personal background and history with cannabis. So why don't we kick it off there and tell us, how long you've been using cannabis and what got you to this point?
Yeah, sure. So I am relatively new compared to a lot of people when it comes to my experience with cannabis.
Chris is just being humble, guys.
I didn't experiment with cannabis much growing up. I joined the military, had a successful military tour, did quite a few deployments, and unfortunately, I left the military with some mental issues, related to, the PTSD and the anxiety and stuff like that. I was, put on every pill under the sun, and, just me being a young, stubborn young man, I wasn't really interested in doing all these pills, and I wanted to get my mind right. One of the things I experimented with was cannabis, and it just provided such relaxation and comfort to me that I had to get going on that. I had to have access to it. I moved to Maine, which is an awesome relating point to you, Rob, and I was new in town, and it was hard to get in. And unfortunately, with my job, I couldn't go the medical route. So, all in all, my experience with cannabis is, 7 to 10 years, really.
That's not, a short amount of time, Chris, and it sounds like you've been growing for, a good chunk of that time. So I think you need to give yourself a little more credit here and know that you do have some harvest under your belt. Like you said, you have 2 to 3 dozen. That's a pretty good amount, man. That's a lot of failures. I know that a lot of our listeners don't even have one. So let's help them take that first step with this interview. But I do want to, circle back around. And first off, thank you for your service. And I'm curious, what branch of the military were you in?
I was in the Navy.
And you said you did quite a few tours?
Yeah. Well, in the Navy, we would do deployments, so we would go away for a while.
And how many deployments did you do?
So I have about 4 years away. So
wow.
Each deployment ranges from about 6 to 8 months in the job that I did, and sometimes longer depending on what's going on.
Right on. So, talking about helping people get off pills, I'm just going to share a quick story about the reverse of that. Listeners to the show, and maybe Chris, I went through a bout of cannabis hyperemesis syndrome coming up on a year ago. Last May, I got sick right around Mother's Day and had to take 73 days without cannabis before I felt comfortable, experimenting and trying to smoke again. And I've used cannabis as medicine for my entire life. 15 years old, I started smoking. I just fell in love with cannabis. I've consumed it every day since I was 17 years old. And the lack of cannabis in my body caused so many issues for me. It was unreal. Pain in joints that I hadn't experienced before.
Right.
A decent amount of depression, a little bit of anxiety. And I was seeing a mental health counselor, and she was offering pills, and I was like, I just don't want to. Like, I don't want to rely on that. Like, if I'm going to rely on something, I want it to be cannabis. Like, that's what I want. And part of the depression was the lack of cannabis, and the other part of the depression was the lack of cannabis, because I wasn't able to do something that I enjoyed and that was part of me, and I was dealing with the fact that I may never be able to do it again. Getting into the industry or being in the industry and not being able to consume, I was really struggling with a lot of that. So I really, laud your mission to be able to help people get off pills. And I wanted to ask, have you heard of the New England Veterans Alliance, the NEVA guys?
I have, actually. I've done just some very surface level research. I've checked out the website. I've seen some of the programs they offer. I can't say that I've signed up or gotten much deeper than that.
Sure.
I definitely have them on my list to research more and possibly meet/see at the New England Cannabis Convention.
So you'll be there in Boston in a couple of weeks?
Yeah, that's what I'm pumped for. And, I have a few people that I'm looking specifically out to see, and my wife as well. She's looking to see, a few people too. She listens to both Growcrest and the Home Growers Network with me, and she loves it. She loves seeing the passion that I have for something, because
Awesome.
it's not just for me. It's, shows like this is exactly what grows our community.
Cool. Well, I appreciate those kind words. I'll be at NECAN, and maybe with the mention of this, I'll nope, I'm not going to be able to get this up before the show. So hopefully I've seen you all at NECAN. Chris, maybe we'll catch up. I'm going to be there Friday, and then I'm going to SeedCon on Saturday. NECAN wasn't allowed to allow seed vendors to sell seeds on site anymore. So the seed vendors have moved to a place in Millbury, in the Care Factory. So we'll be going there Saturday to do a lot of industry networking type of things.
Awesome.
So if you're looking to acquire seeds, that's where you'll have to be. I think some of them will still have booths, and they've set up a satellite location to be able to sell seeds out of. So
perfect. Yeah, I'll have to check that out. I didn't know that. I'll have to look into that as well.
Yeah, and please meet up with those NEVA guys. We've got some big things coming. NEVA is going to be the recipient of our charity donations from our membership program, mygrowpass.com. Every month we give away a portion of each of our member dues over to a charity. Currently, we're working with the Northwest Families for Autism. And on April 1st, we're going to be switching over to NEVA. Sometime in April, beginning of May, I'm also working with the NEVA guys to do a used grow equipment drive at a couple grow stores across New England, hoping to collect used grow equipment and be able to kick it down to veterans that are less fortunate, and be able to help them get started on providing themselves with medicine. So more on that as we finalize those details.
It sounds awesome, and thank you for doing that.
Yeah. So make sure you catch up with those NEVA guys at NECAN. Where are we? Why don't we talk about your current grow setup? Bring the audience into your garden and share specifics. Size of tent, brand of tent,
awesome,
lights, whatever you got there, buddy.
Yeah, you got it. Yeah, so I find myself to be relatively handy. So I went away from buying a tent. I live in the state of Maine, so basements are a very common thing, as people in the New England area know. I ended up setting up what I call my office, and it's an 80 square foot framed in room in my basement. I ran ventilation specifically for this hobby. I ran my electrical all tailored to this hobby. I absolutely love it. I got, a lot of hours in there, both working, and enjoying this hobby. And when I say working, I don't mean like as a job. I mean working on my plants, and that to me is different. I run a flood and drain table, or ebb and flow, as some people know it. And I just bought your standard hydroponics tray, and I framed it in myself. I run digital timers that I purchased off of Amazon. I bought a few of them just in case one fails or one acts funky. And I run a 17-gallon reservoir out of a tote, that every grower has. Seems like we have a few of them. I bought these totes, 17 gallons. I bought a few of them just to help me out with maintenance. That's on one side of my framed-in office. And on the other side, I have a 3x4 portion. And just my background, I don't really grow for profit or for business. I just grow for myself. So for me, 2 plants in flower at all times works great. So I have a 3x4 space. I use 2 deep water culture buckets, and I grow those under 1,000-watt HPS, horticulture. I didn't mention, but my veg side of the room is only thing I use there is a fluorescent. It's a Agrobite T5. I use the 6.4-foot tubes, and that gives me some setup in my mind. It allows me to see the plants at all times because I have a little bit of the extra space. I'm not packing them in there. So I found that kind of helps me out when it comes to IPM and training, stuff like that. It allows me to have a good picture of what I want to do in my head.
Cool. So you run 1,000-watt HPS over 2 flowering plants at all times?
Yes.
Those are pretty beefy plants. Do they fill up that 3x4 space?
Oh yeah, they totally do. And I have my trellis set up too, so I intertwine the plants through my trellis, and it fills up the whole area. I'm all about the canopy, and helping me out there. Sometimes gets a little painful when it comes time to harvest, but I'm a big boy, and I think I could do it. It's only 2 plants. That's what I tell myself every time.
I personally hate trellis netting for multiple reasons. I hated the waste because I just cut it. Like, I needed a new trellis every time because I was not, trying to untangle. Because if you use the trellis right, it's pretty well, your buds are pretty well tangled in it.
Yeah. Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And I just got tired of it. I just hated it.
I'm not going to lie. There are a few larger areas of my trellis that seem to get bigger and bigger. And, that's the beauty of this hobby is you're always learning.
Right.
That might be something that goes away shortly. Or, right now it's what's worked for me. I will agree, though, that does sometimes come a pain in the butt.
Yeah, I think part of my thing is, mobility. I've had both my hips replaced. I got lower back issues. So, like, getting into, small spaces and doing the fine weaving and the supporting is tough on me. So, really nice grow setup. Can you share, what do you average for yield per harvest?
Yeah, sure. So right now, after, I think I've done about anywhere between 2 dozen and 3 dozen harvests. I feel comfortable saying I'm about 3.5 to 4 ounces per plant.
Okay.
And I think a lot of people get mixed up in that and shoot too high. I don't necessarily want a pound per plant if it's crap cannabis.
Right.
I want to really be in tune and produce something good. Like I said, it's for me. Why not take the extra steps or the extra time and make sure that it's good for you,
Right. Yeah. And the great thing about your setup is, if you weren't getting enough, there are things you can do. You can either, put in another 1,000-watt HPS, but you're getting roughly a 0.5 pound per harvest, which is, every 8 to 10 weeks. That's like an ounce a week. And most people, that's more than enough,
Yeah, I would definitely say that I have quite a decent habit, and I have quite a few canning jars that are full.
Yep.
By no means am I broke on the cannabis scale. I think the other thing that is that I really appreciate about my setup is I am able to learn different characteristics of my strains.
Mm-hmm.
And when it comes time to our outdoor harvest, because we're not growing all year round outdoors, when it comes down to my outdoor plants, I know exactly which ones have made the cut. I call those my varsity level plants. I can get those things outside huge. I can do 8-foot plants out there, and it's all of the plants that throughout the year that I've considered to be my favorite. And so if I were ever to be in a low spot, all I get, my summer harvest carries me over, where I'm pulling a pound and a half off of a plant,
right.
and I'm all set,
right. Yeah. I envision a world where, if we're all allowed to grow cannabis, we all have more cannabis than we know what to do with. So we share it with everybody,
Correct. Yeah. Yeah. Definitely. I'm pretty popular on the local friends list. Once we break that barrier of,
right.
Oh, you're a stoner, but you're also not, a loser.
Right.
Yeah, that's right. No, I'm not your stereotype that this world, the society has labeled us.
Right. Right. You can accomplish things when you're stoned, right?
Yeah. I get up, I go to work. I have a very successful career. I we've talked earlier in the broadcast. I'm currently in Hawaii, and it's 5 a.m.
Right.
This is my normal routine. I get up, go to work. I do well for myself. And then when I have my vice and I relax at the end of the day, it just so happens to be with a nice doobie.
That's nothing wrong with that, my friend. Right. We are going to take a break here and thank our friends over at Fishhead Farms. My buddy Tom, who's been on the show with Growcast with Jordan, talks about his journey into the industry and how, he came up with harvesting fish poop. Is really what it comes down to, packaging it up in a bottle and getting it to you. If you've ever been around this stuff, it's clearly legit fish shit. It smells like fish shit. I can't even imagine riding in a car delivering that stuff with that stuff permeating throughout. Some batches are way worse than some others. It's whatever they feed those fish. But head on over to fishheadfarms.com. Grab yourself 10% off by using code GROWCAST. It's aquaponics in a bottle. We've done lots of episodes of aquaponics on Growcast, Stephen Reisner, Potent Ponics, Leighton Morrison. Listen to those. The benefits of aquaponics are real, and Fishhead Farms makes it super simple. So fishheadfarms.com, grab their product Fish Shit. Members get 25% off. You, listeners, everybody gets 10% off by using the code GROWCAST. Now let's get back to this great interview with Chris. So Chris, we talked about, your current grow setup and your ebb and flow table. I was hoping you could really share with the audience how to get started setting up that hydro system, and specifically, any tips to keep it relatively, on the cheaper end of things.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, this is something that I really hold close to heart. I'm a father. I have children. I have family. So I am not a guy that can go drop out and drop $3,000 on a grow setup. I with my labor and my little bit of handy skills that I have and my normal household tools, I did my Home Depot trips and I did my Lowe's trips and Amazon, and I built it myself. I have done extensive research. I went out and I did this research before I went out and pulled the trigger with my wallet. And the only reason why is because, I go out and start spending all this money and it's something that doesn't work out. My wife might start asking some questions, But yeah, so I framed it out using 2x4s, and I would simply draw, plan everything out before I did it. I like to have friends, if they see my grow room or something like that, I have pride in saying, oh yeah, I built this. I built this. Some of the things that helped me save money and was a little bit more upfront, but not by much, was buying 2 pumps, buying 2 timers, buying 2 reservoirs. And the reason for that was because if one failed, I wasn't completely out of luck and my plants wouldn't fail. Example of that is my pumps. Sorry, my pumps. If my pump went out, I still need a way to water my plants, and I didn't want to sit there and hand water all my plants that have started and grown in a ebb and flow tray. So and I did experience that. I experienced a pump that just failed. These pumps that we get sometimes have plastic internal components, and combined with a motor that's metal, and sometimes you'll heat them up. So when I noticed that my plants were looking a little dry and droopy, I had to do some troubleshooting. I realized my pump wasn't working. So simple, easy fix. I had a pump on standby. It cost me $18 that I put out forward, and I expended up front, and I just swapped it out. And what do you know? Everything went back to beauty.
Cool. I didn't know if you were done there. Sorry.
Might have just lost my train of thought. But yeah.
It happens. It's 5 a.m. there after all. Yeah. And, you're an East Coaster, so maybe it's more, halfway in between.
Yeah.
Did you do any more do-it-yourself stuff to get your ebb and flow system set up? Did you, you're in a table. Did you go to a hydro store to get that, or any websites to make that on the cheaper end?
So I definitely shopped in the local hydro store, and I bought a used ebb and flow tray table. I see absolutely no reason not to reuse the plastic that they're made out of.
Sure, and that can be cleaned.
Yeah, I definitely cleaned it. I cleaned it all up, and it nobody else besides me knew that I bought it for $28 instead of $60 or $80 that I found it online for, and so that worked out great for me. Some of the other things I did in my room to make it more of a DIY was My electrical, definitely my electrical helped me out. I did buy, oh, actually, I didn't even buy it. This is a great story. I have a good friend who's a caretaker down in Maine. I'll actually give him a little shout out if that's allowed.
Yeah, totally. Please.
Southern Maine Sugar Shack. He was able, he's a caretaker, and he was able to kick me off a few things, and
Cool.
that helped me out greatly, and he was very positive about, hey, I don't mind helping out. I don't mind helping you out on your journey, and that worked out great. I went from a customer of his to now he's someone that I bug and question on the daily because, well, maybe not on the daily, but bug and question about this hobby and about the plant and just his experience. He has, quite a bit of experience. He does well with his business. So it was nice to have someone like that to kick off some of the things he gave me with power distribution unit. He's offered me lights, stuff like that. Just great guy to have around, and there's plenty of other people in the industry that are like that as well.
Well, make sure he knows about the used equipment drive when we kick that off.
Oh, yeah.
Every caregiver I know, every grower I know has like, oh, I use this light, and then, I saved some money, so I upgraded this light, and, let's kick down those, lower end lights to some veterans so that they can save money and then they can buy a new light.
Yeah,
man, just saying that stuff out loud though, like I might go off on a little tangent. My wife and I have recently really just tried to reduce our carbon footprint and make an impact on the environment. We've done roadside cleanups, and we've almost completely eliminated the use of paper towels and paper plates and that type of stuff in our own home. But just saying those sentences like, let's start out with a cheap light and then get rid of that. Like, if we don't kick that down to the next person that needs it so that they can start their journey, as long as it's good grow equipment, like prevent that stuff from ending up in a landfill somewhere. Like, let's kill these things and then give it to somebody who can repair it and then have them kill it. Like, let's keep this stuff going as you upgrade, like find somebody to, even mentor. And like that Southern Maine Sugar Shack did for you, like every grower, has those stories where like, oh, I used to, help my buddy out with some weed and then I helped him learn how to grow and then, that's perpetuated. So, keep that going. Like that needs to keep going.
Yeah, totally. I totally agree. And I think his specific words were, this thing's just collecting dust at my place.
Right. Right. Yeah.
And space is value. We need that space, so it's like, I'll take that. And you don't want that dust, dust causes problems. So,
well, when we started kicking off this used equipment drive idea, somebody mentioned like, do we want to go to dispensaries? And ask them, I'm like, guys, like you're talking like hundreds of lights at a time. Like if they switch from HPS to LEDs, like those are 300, 500, 1,000 hoods that they switched over. And those are probably sitting in a warehouse because there's still some value to them. But even if it's a tax write-off to a donation like NEVA, but then we have to find a place for 1,000 hoods, HPS hoods to go. So we're going to hold off on that and just keep this small for right now. So maybe that's phase, 4 of this project. So
there you go. You got a plan. You got a good path ahead,
Right. I mean, hopefully we can impact lots of veterans' lives. So, Chris, can we, talk about your advice on things that new growers should be avoiding and not necessarily falling, for tricks or traps or whatever?
Yeah, totally. I think one of the big things, and I've made this mistake numerous times, is, the internet is a great place, but it also can bite you in the butt. You don't know every person's level of experience when it comes to posting something on the internet. You can have Joe Schmo who just did 1 or 2 grows and this worked out for him, but that might not necessarily be what's best for you. And, some of the guys that I follow that I really enjoy, are on the show quite often. It's like Dr. Coco, Wolfman, stuff like that. But if you listen to them, sometimes they have differences, right? Everybody has different opinions. And the same with mentors, right? I don't necessarily feel that I have just one mentor. I have my own opinion. I have my own experience. And quite frankly, that's what works out best for me, because these other opinions don't necessarily know what my setup is, what my situation is. So I do really, really put more weight on Dr. Coco and Wolfman. But at the same time, I just take in all their information as a sponge and kind of tailor it to my life, my grow, my setup.
Bingo.
I feel that the best setup for you is simply the best setup for you. As simple as that sounds, I can't say that, the ebb and flow system that I run is going to work for everybody. There isn't just one way to grow cannabis. And I think that is the biggest tip that I can give. That there is numerous ways out there to successfully grow cannabis. And you have to figure out the way that works for you. And I feel you do that by getting into it. It can be an intimidating world. You don't want to necessarily go out and in my eyes, I can't do it, but I don't think anybody wants to do it. I don't think you want to go out necessarily and buy these, couple $1,000 LED lights and your whole grow setup, spending all this money, and then finding out that, you have poor ventilation, or that, you have to research. And then when you feel comfortable, and your budget allows you to, take that step, meet those friends. It's definitely awkward walking up to a random guy and asking him, who does this as a profession, for tips. It's not probably something you do on the first conversation, but you got to do that sometime. You have to ask sometime. And one of the things that I really enjoy doing is working with this community and learning from everybody.
Now, what type of advice would you give to new growers for them to kind of vet the advice, or vet an article, or vet somebody's post on Instagram that they're like, man, that's an outrageous technique, but it worked for them. Maybe I should try it. What type of advice, what's the process that you went through? And then I'll share mine, which, longtime listeners have heard before. But what should they do to kind of be like, is this fact or fiction?
Yeah, totally. In my eyes, is on Instagram, look further back. When they got that one plant that did well, just that one plant that did well. What about the rest of their posts? How does that look? Do they not post any of their cannabis at all? Do they have photos of average looking plants all throughout the rest of their Instagram? I'll tell you a funny story. I was in California with some of my family, and because that's one of the cool things about this is my family is involved in the hobby as well, and they had mentioned to me that so and so's coming over and he has some great cannabis. It's great cannabis. It's fire. It's fire. That's what they kept on saying. It's fire. It's fire. And so and so did show up, and he showed me his cannabis, and I looked at it, and as a grower, I felt like I could make this guy's fire look like crap. And like we mentioned, I got 7 to 10 years of experience. I'm not doing this professionally, and if he's doing this professionally and mine looks better, then I don't think he's that big of a professional. And I was respectful, because I'm a very easygoing guy and I get along with everybody. So I didn't bring this up that his fire looked like dog doo-doo. But I had taught my family out there that, I do agree that it's not the look of the plant that gets you the THC, but, there are some general things you can kind of look at, if you have the discoloration, if you look at the leaves and they're looking like crap, if everything's nutrient burned, you can almost see how well the place is ventilated if you have a lot of, heat stress or something like that on the plant. If they're showing pictures with deficiencies in their plant, is that really something that you trust, or is that something that you want to grow like? It's always something that I think of. I'm putting this in my body, and I want my way of growing cannabis to really shoot for the top. 2 plants, I can do that.
Well, I think the people that I enjoy following the most and learning the most from are the people like Hoda Herb,
Oh yeah, yeah,
who is
totally.
a personal friend of mine. We hang out.
Awesome. Yeah, I've loved him on the show. I really follow him. I like his train of
Right,
thought.
right.
Yeah.
But he's not willing to say I effed up. He had a hermaphrodited plant that he didn't catch for a long time, and it had affected his grow, and he was upfront and honest about that. Like, you're going to make mistakes no matter how good you are. I had a hermaphrodited plant that I seeded out an entire 8 light room, 4 years into being a professional caregiver. And it was embarrassing. It cost us lots of money, but I share that story so that people can learn from it. And those are the people that I want to follow and encourage people to follow so that they can learn from as well.
God.
Not everything goes perfect. And that's, the other thing about social media is, and part of the problems with our world is that, you can schedule a day where you go and have a photo shoot and do 20 amazing things and then post it for the next 6 months, making it seem like you're doing an amazing thing every day. And that shit doesn't, that shit just doesn't happen,
No, totally. I actually, speaking of hermaphrodited plants, I'll share this experience that, was embarrassing. And luckily for me, the only one I have to really answer to is my wife, and I love her to death. She's an amazing person. But she definitely knows how to jab, and she lives it. So she's learned to have a head on a swivel. But one of the things that, and this kind of will circle back a little bit. One of the things that I do, and I don't think it's necessarily the right way, but it's something that I have to do, is I don't hit my plants when they're in veg with a huge feeding cycle. I wish I could, but really when it comes to budget, I just, there's certain things I can afford, and my budget doesn't call for throwing a 3-part, or 2-part at it all the time. So what I like to do is I like to know that what I'm growing is going to be something I'm interested in growing before I hit it and I invest more and more money into it. And sometimes that's brutal. Well, sure enough, with my 2-plant setup, I was about 4 or 5 weeks into flower, and I had a plant hernia on me. And it was a hard pill to swallow. It was just an unstable plant. I didn't know that going into it.
Sure.
And, unfortunately, that was a loss. Well, my boss, like I said, my old lady, when she realized that, hey, there's been a little bit of a change in the flower tent. You went from something looking amazing to now where it looks like we're in week 1 again. What's going on? Why are we still going through the stretch? And and I had to swallow that pill and be like, yeah, they're actually out back in the compost pile.
Wow.
And she was like, oh, well, how is that going to set us back? And luckily for me, we've had, a few, like I said, a few harvests where we're not starving for cannabis,
right?
So it was like, yeah, well, that sucks, because we do like seeing the end result of the plant. We like following it. We track it on a few different online grows. Dr. Coco and his New Year's grow challenge. That was my plant that I was going with.
Oh, bummer.
Unfortunately, there went my diary.
Bummer.
But that's the great part about this is, everything you do, you learn from.
Right.
And it's just, in my eyes, it's notes in my journal, things to learn from,
Yep. I had a couple thoughts on the new growers. I wanted to share my advice for vetting information. And, we all do Google searches. And, I did the same thing when I started growing. And whenever I did a search, roughly 8 to 12 articles load on the first page. I would encourage everybody to read, at least scan all of those first page result articles.
Yeah.
And if you have 10 results and, 7 of them say, to spray your plants with this, for mites, and then 2 say, to do this. And then 1, random 10% person says to pee at the roots of your plants and then, light sulfur in the room. You got to be like, well, why is only 1 person saying that and 7 people are saying this? Like, if it's one-off advice, like, Google that and dig into that if you want to kind of prove or disprove that. But if 70%, like, start with the 70%, and work your way down. Don't just like, oh, this one guy succeeded at this. The other aspect is like you said, is, go with the tried and true methods at first until you build up a little supply and can afford to miss a harvest if something goes wrong, or to be set back 4 weeks if something goes wrong. So that if you do try something, you change up the newts or try, deep water culture or whatever. If it fails, you're not having to go to a dispensary and buy a $300 ounce or whatever. So
yeah,
that's my advice, is just kind of, work through the information you're provided, vet it out, but don't do a bunch of changes at once. First of all, just do one change at once. And second of all, wait until you have a little supply.
Yeah, I agree with that.
So Chris, we're going to wrap things up here. And, you're really speaking my language with your response to this next question. And it was, tips for increasing yield. Your first response was consistent journaling. And I'm hoping, since that's kind of a theme of our show, and a consistent tip that we give, I hope you can dig into that and other tips that you have for increasing yield. And then we'll let you go and enjoy the beautiful Hawaii weather before you start working.
Awesome. Yeah, totally. So the journaling thing is huge. I document with photos as well as my own chicken scratch. I'm honest to say that I am not the biggest pH document that. I do check it, but I'm not like, ooh, this was down at 6.1 today or up at 6.1 today. Yesterday it was 6.0. What am I going to do? I don't make drastic changes like that, but I do document, when I put this in, I notice a physical change in my plant. I also, one of the big things I watch is temperature. I think the lessons that I've learned on these channels is huge when it comes to VPD. So that pushed me to log more of my humidity. How did the plants look? And I'm not a professional, so if you read my notes, if you could, sometimes I even struggle. If I could, I started having these problems. What was my humidity at? I seen slow growth. What was my humidity at? And I can always see, and I somewhat equate this to my time in the military. We took a lot of logs, and let's look back and let's see what the environment was like. Oh, okay. This took had a lot higher ppm. Oh, but if I also look, the temperature was a lot higher. So to me, that means the plant was drinking more water compared to the newts. It was taking up more water compared to the newts, and having those notes is huge, especially when it comes to the outdoor season. Because, like I said, I roll my best plants and what the plants that I'm most comfortable with to my outdoor season, and I have a heads up. It's kind of like, I can go back and expect, this plant to do this plant to have a huge stretch period. This plant to be a huge feeder, this plant to be not a big feeder. It does great without needing everything. This plant doesn't need as much CalMag. It doesn't seem like it has to have it. That stuff is huge for me. And what I found is when I first started, I was getting half an ounce out of a plant. And what I found by my journal is that kind of got me higher. I would sometimes double, if not triple my yield based off of knowing the plant, and that was huge for me because I was, seeing progress made me more and more motivated to stay in the hobby and to continue to grow my knowledge. And sometimes the journal and the photos can be a pain in the butt. I've mentioned that I do this hobby and I don't want it to be a job. So simplicity is good. So if I can look at photos and see, this is what, week 4 looked like my last grow of this plant, where am I at? Am I excelling? Am I degressing? How are we doing here? The journals are huge. I use an app called Simply Bud, and it helps me out. It allows a little place for me to take down my chicken scratch, so that way it's a little more legible, but not all the time do I like sitting on my phone. I like going down to my office, enjoying the tunes, and I have, just a few various journals that I keep on hand, and I keep them, I archive them. I keep them in my room, or I keep them, other places with my supplies. And I have to go back to it. I just look up my strain and look up how we grew it, whether it was outdoor or whether it was my DWC. And I refer back to it. And really, that's what helped me grow my yield.
So I'm curious, and I just have one thing, and then we'll, let you get out of here, is you regularly grow in ebb and flow in a hydro setup, and then you switch to outdoor. I assume you're growing in soil out there.
Yeah.
What kind of adjustments are you making? I mean, you've had years of experience. So what kind of adjustments do you make from growing a plant in a hydro setup and then bringing that plant outside and growing in soil?
Yeah, totally. So pH is a completely different ballgame outside. That's what I've learned. I'm growing, my normal pH indoor is, somewhere between 5.7, 6.2-ish. And outside is, we're in the high sixes, and that's, I don't usually outside, I don't usually feed as much with newts, but I definitely do based off of me just reading the plant, and I think that's something that comes with a little bit of experience that I do have, where I am now compared to where I was 7 years ago when I was growing in a tent that, had way too many plants, not enough ventilation and too much heat. I definitely feel that now my adjustments that I've made to going outdoor consist of pH, direct sunlight versus, this plant will get some sunlight, In my grow room, it's easy to give them light. I just, the timer goes on and there's my light. Sometimes in my yard, I have to be strategic. I want it to get as much sun as direct sunlight as it possibly can. So luckily for me, everybody has a tractor in Maine. And I throw it up on my John Deere, and move it if I have to. Move it if I see the spring growth has gotten crazy and it's blocking out some of the sun. I get to move the plant.
Well, first of all, I think you mispronounced that. It's John Deere, not John Deere.
Oh, that's right. You're right. Thank you very much for that.
And secondly, you said that you don't do. I guess my question is, it's got to be a completely different feeding regimen from your hydro. Like you don't have the soil buffer. You can affect and really manipulate that nutrients. Where outside you're dealing with the soil buffer. You're dealing with, what are you growing outside? Are you a pro mix, soft-sided pots type of thing, or are you right in the ground?
No. I'm glad we got to this because this is something that I've grown dramatically, and I would say recently, by meaning the past 3 years. I have a mix, and you've probably heard of it with the Maine roots. Is I think the specific name is Maine.
Coast of Maine, Stonington.
Coast of Maine. There you go. Yeah. So
never heard of it.
I do a pro mix, a 50-50 mix there.
Okay.
And I put it in. For lack of a better term, I have a blue potable water jug that I've cut, a big 50-gallon drum that I've cut in half. I had 2 of those, so I grow 4 big plants in those.
Okay.
And that provides for my drainage. And then when it comes to feeding, as far as like supplementing, for the most part, that soil does really good feeding the plant.
Sure.
It does great feeding the plant. If I do see some deficiencies, which are sometimes harder to catch outside based off of the outdoor elements, it might not be just a little discoloration, might not be a nitrogen deficiency or something like that. You kind of, what I've found is I'm a little slower to react. I don't have those knee-jerk reactions outside because, like I mentioned, the name that society has given this plant for years is weeds, and guess what? This plant will grow just like a weed in your yard,
sure.
And the one thing that I do really enjoy is that outdoor grow. I enjoy that so much because I kind of give myself a little bit of time. I don't have to have that knee-jerk reaction. Where in hydroponics with the DWC, I feel like I have to be have a quicker response.
Mm-hmm.
If that makes sense.
Yeah, totally. I mean, soil is a buffer, so not reacting so quickly is because you don't have to react so quickly. So that makes perfect sense. I have 2 things. Do you add any microbes, any fish shit, mammoth pee to help activate the stuff in the Stonington blend? If the answer is no, that's okay. I'm going to challenge you this summer to use some of those products help activate the soil and get things churning, and it provides better nutrient uptake from an organic soil.
Okay, so I just recently started experimenting with the microbes in my hydroponics.
Okay.
And I am all for it.
Okay.
I am absolutely all for it. The other part of that is the wife and I started our compost pile.
Yep. Awesome.
So eventually my goal is to get away from some of the products that I have to buy, right? We spoke about budget and how important that is.
Yep.
So I'd like to eventually get away from the soil products and use my compost, and my microbes are in my compost already,
Right.
But I totally will take you up on that. I've been using this product called P31. I've used the fish shit I'm a big fan of. But it's just like we talked about. I can only do so much on my budget,
right. Yeah,
and
I'm a big budget person, but I also, if you can buy a bottle of fish shit for $50 and get, 4 more ounces out of each plant, it might be a worthwhile
totally
exchange.
Yeah.
Totally
worth it.
I also have another challenge for you, and if your budget is up for it this summer, I'd like to see if out of your 4 outdoor plants, you'd be willing to try one with like 100% Stonington blend through the summer.
Okay.
And we can talk about that transition period if you want later on. But I'd love to get you back on the show if you do a little experimentation to see the difference, if there was any difference in your plants and your results at the end of the summer.
Yeah, totally. I'd totally be up for that. I mean, like you had mentioned earlier, right now earlier you mentioned, wait till you establish your roots and you have a head, and experiments aren't going to hurt you, So
right.
I'm totally down to seeing something like that, especially with an outdoor harvest,
Yeah, and it's the perfect setup. You have 4 plants. If you do 2 the same way that you're going to get really awesome results, and then 2 you can experiment in 2 separate ways, whether that's, trying a different microbe or complete straight compost and then, 100% Stonington blend, whatever. That's a perfect setup.
Yeah, that'd be an awesome experiment, and document it with photos and stuff like that, just so, everybody likes to read, I guess, but why not be easier, simplicity, and just show the photos.
Totally. Totally. Chris, we're going to wrap things up. Let you go enjoy a nice walk on Hawaii Beach, hopefully.
Awesome.
Do you have any last bits of advice or words of wisdom you'd like to share with the audience?
Yeah, just keep it simple. Simplicity is what wins, and time is what I value. Like I said, I have my family, so I don't necessarily want to be spending 3 to 4 hours every Sunday in my grow room. Right now my maintenance is down to under an hour of maintenance weekly.
Wow.
I make my water, I mix my feed, I do great there, and it really causes for less stress. I'm not spending as much time in there, and it works out great.
Cool. And where can people find and connect with you on Instagram if they'd like to kind of check out your grow?
I think I'm going to keep that a private for now.
Okay. Cool.
But who knows? Maybe in the future, depending on where life takes me, maybe I'll be a little more public.
Okay, cool. And that is, your prerogative. And, as we transition into more legal ease, things will begin to change. And we're part of being the change we wish to see in the world. So
that's what I'm hoping for, and that's why I'm talking here with you, bud.
Cool. All right, guys. That's it for Chris and I. Happy growing. And if you like what you heard, please, as always, rate, review, subscribe, share, spread the good work that we're doing here at the Homegrown Helpers to a friend of yours so that they can learn and take that first step or that next step growing cannabis. Till next time, we'll catch you later.